Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode with Talks with Ide Evergreen. So, in this particular episode, we're just going to be talking about API observability, talking about error tracking. Why should developers care about error tracking and API observability in their code base? And to have the discussion, I brought in Patrick to come have the discussion with me, and this should be a very exciting conversation. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Ido. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing amazing. What about you?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain.
Okay, great, amazing. Before we just jump into the conversation, let's just do some introductions, right? So just give us an intro of what you've been up to and what you currently do in the tech space.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick Odey. I'm a developer relations engineer currently working at APIToolkit. So about what I do right now and in the tech space, I love helping developers use tools better. And I do this through writing, making videos, and also community management and engagement. And I do a little bit of technical support too. And you have a knowledge of the product, so you have to help the developers. So I would consider that technical support too. And over the years, I've worked on a lot of things, from open source projects to making how-to guides and mentoring at coding bootcamps. And when I'm not working, so I actually like filming action sports like skateboarding and BMXing. Actually happy to be a guest on your show.
Yeah, definitely. The pleasure is mine too. So let's just jump into the conversation, right? So let's just jump into definitions. So basically, what's API observability and why should developers care?
Okay, so API observability is all about understanding what's happening inside your APIs in real time. And don't get me wrong, it actually goes beyond just like monitoring. It's about collecting deep insights into performance, errors, and how your API is being used generally. The question of why should developers care? I mean, developers need to care about observability to avoid pitfalls that comes with ignoring observability.
Okay, amazing. So thinking about API observability right now, right? So what do you think is the biggest challenge developers get to face with API today? So for example, right, developers getting to build APIs, different kind of APIs, right? So let's say for example, REST APIs. So what do you think are the biggest challenges they face in the day-to-day activity of building APIs?
Okay, now fun fact is I just made a video, or I recently made a video on this topic, and I hope to share it with the viewers maybe later. So developers actually face a lot of challenges when it comes to monitoring APIs and working with APIs in general, but I'm going to highlight just a few. So I'll start with the issue of catching breaking changes and critical errors. That's catching them before they impact the users. So even small API changes like a missing field, an altered response can completely break integrations. So most of these changes, they go unnoticed until production issues arises. So that's a very big issue. Another issue would be the problem of making sense of logs, metrics, traces, and also request payloads. So when developers try debugging without clear insights, they go through like endless logs trying to manually like piece together traces and errors. And I mean, if you think about it, this is really time consuming and frustrating. So another problem like developers face, or another challenge developers face when it comes to APIs, is monitoring performance. So
Okay.
when I talk about monitoring performance, it's not just about the internal APIs, but also the external APIs, because a lot of companies rely on third-party APIs to function. Now, that's why API observability is very important, because it helps developers stay ahead of problems, and it helps them debug faster, and it also ensures smooth performance.
Okay, amazing. Thinking about API observability again now. So how does this differentiate, or how does this differ, right? I think that's a better word. How does this differ from your traditional
Yeah,
logging or monitoring?
okay, that's an interesting one. So when it comes to traditional logging and monitoring, quite all right. Traditional logging and monitoring tells you what happened, right? Like for example, it tells you an API request failed, or the response time of this API request just spiked. But when it comes to observability, it goes way deeper. Like it helps you understand why that problem happened. And also traditional logging captures individual events. Observability actually combines telemetry data like logs, tricks, and traces, and it gives you a full picture into that particular API's behavior. So instead of just seeing the error messages, you can actually trace the request and history of everything that went on during that request. You can also inspect the payloads, and you can finally pinpoint where things exactly went wrong.
Amazing. Okay, so right now, what do you actually think are some failures that developers get to face? So developers are building out APIs, right? Let's say the backend engineers, right, are basically building out APIs. So could we quickly just talk about what are the common failures they don't actually see coming, that you feel like, okay, these developers should have like observability set up in their particular system or in their particular services. So what are the common failures or the common API failures you feel like that could happen maybe in production or during development?
Okay, so there are several API failures that developers fail to catch or that catch developers off guard. And like I mentioned earlier, one of them is breaking changes. So, for example, an API response structure changes, and let's say a field gets removed or a new, like a field is being required, or let's say some other parameter is being introduced and suddenly things stop working. They never see it coming. That's why it's good to set up observability, because you can actually monitor things that have changed in that particular API. Because when you set up observability, it's actually monitoring your API for changes. So another thing is silent failures from third-party APIs. If your company or if your product is actually utilizing a third-party API, there are things that can change on that API that you don't know about. So if you introduce observability into your applications, it's actually going to trace what's going on with those third-party APIs. It's going to tell you, okay, if the response from that API is actually very slow, if they are having a downtime or any problem that's going with the API. So you can have an idea, this problem is not actually coming from me, it's coming from the third-party API, and I can maybe reach out to them and try to resolve the issue. Then there's also issue of rate limiting. So most developers, like, they assume that APIs will always be available, which is very wrong. As a
Mm,
developer, you might have noticed in cases where maybe you're trying to reach a particular API, but
yeah.
you are hitting a particular rate limit that can actually make requests to be blocked, and you can have unexpected downtime. So that also is an issue. And also, I would like to mention authentication issues.
All
So
right.
there are a couple of times where, like, an API can, like, for example, a token can expire, or
Mm.
maybe it might change, or an API key is being revoked. So that can be an issue where developers don't really see coming, but happens during the course of production or development.
Okay, amazing. So speaking about API observability again, right? Just thinking about it right now, it really kind of improves developer experience, and you could also say it increases the product reliability, right? That's in the sense of people being able to rely on that particular product, right? So what do you feel like? How does a proper error tracking, right, basically improve developer experience and the product reliability, how people can rely on that particular product? I don't know if you got that.
Yeah, I think I understand you. So I think proper error tracking is actually a game changer for both developers and the product's reliability. So I'll take it for developers, then for the product reliability. So for developers, it means faster debugging, no more guessing on what went wrong or digging through endless logs, like I mentioned earlier. So with clear insights into errors, stacks, traces, and the affected requests, they can quickly identify and fix these issues. On the part of product reliability, so error tracking helps catch problems early, and it helps catch these errors even before the users can notice them. So instead of waiting for complaints from your users, the team can actually address these bugs and reduce the downtime and ensure a smooth experience when using the product.
Okay,
So,
okay,
like, in a nutshell, I would say better error tracking leads to happy developers and a few frustrated users.
amazing. Okay, so we just want to talk about real life examples, right? So could you
Okay.
actually share like a real life example of where maybe API observability, right, could actually help resolve an issue? So what do I mean? You just basically sharing a real world example of an API failure of how observability tools out there, right, could basically help and resolve it. So it could be maybe an experience you've gotten to see happen, right? Maybe on your team, or maybe people working with your team, or maybe in a previous role, or but like, can you just share a real world example of where tools for observing your APIs, right, has really been helpful?
Yeah, so before I joined the team, I've listened to Anthony Alaribe, the founder of API Toolkit. So he shared a story on a podcast on how this product was bettered, or the idea of this product was bettered. So he shared about them moving to, they had like, I think if I get this correctly, the company was working at kind of like expanded to, I think, Asia, or to a location where they had a lot of customers, and they were getting a lot of like request, and there were a lot of users that signed up to use the application. It was kind of like an e-commerce application, right? So them having this amount of users, they ended up like getting some kind of like errors, or should I say they got into some kind of issues because of the traffic they were getting. I don't think they actually expected that kind of traffic. So they lost a lot of money, according to the explanation. They lost a lot of money due to that. So if API observability was being implemented into the product at that point, they would know where exactly they are getting these problems from. Okay. But according to the story, they spent a lot of time trying to fix these errors, and it cost the company a lot of money. So that's where the idea of API Toolkit came from. And also that's why we see that observability is really powerful. So it turns API failures from frustrating mysteries into like solvable problems. So it also like helps the team to debug faster and keeps the application running smoothly.
Amazing, amazing. So let's just jump into API toolkit. So speaking about API toolkit, right? So you basically saying so API toolkit actually is an API observability tool, correct? So what's the specific problems? What specific problems does API toolkit solve for developers?
So API Toolkit solves a lot of problems, like all the problems I highlighted earlier. That's what API Toolkit solve. But just to like go into it a little bit further, API Toolkit solves the issues of like catching breaking changes and errors early. So APIs do evolve. APIs do evolve, right? And
Correct.
even the smallest of like changes can break integration. So API Toolkit helps detect these issues in real time so that developers can fix them before the users can notice this, or the problems can impact the users. And API Toolkit also helps with deep debugging. So it gives you the different logs, metrics, and traces. And instead of guessing why your API request failed, developers can get like clear insight into the request payloads, into the response time, and into like the error patterns. And it actually makes the debugging way faster and easier. And API Toolkit also helps when it comes to monitoring performance. So a lot of applications rely on third-party APIs, and if they slow down or fail, it can actually affect your application. So API Toolkit helps track the API health, and also you can spot issues before like they escalate beyond repairs.
Amazing. Okay. So how does API toolkit integrate with existing API infrastructure? So what do I mean? So thinking about API infrastructures, we could talk about maybe Node.js, maybe Next.js, because Next.js is a full stack framework. So you could run your APIs
Yeah.
and your route handlers and stuff like that. So how does API toolkit actually work with this existing API infrastructures? Node.js, Next.js, then I think maybe Python and like the whole infrastructures we have out there for creating APIs. How does API toolkit kind of integrate with these tools or these infrastructures?
Okay, so the way API Toolkit was built, it was built in a way that it can seamlessly integrate with any existing API infrastructure. We have over 17 SDKs for different frameworks,
Amazing.
and it covers everything from Node.js, Python, Go. So, and if it happens that you're using any particular framework that we don't have an SDK available for, we can actually create one for you if you request. So it basically integrates with everything, kind of like framework agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
So the integration is actually straightforward. You can just install the SDK and just add a few lines of code, which we have documented, and you can instantly start collecting logs, metrics, and traces. So whether you're using REST or GraphQL or any microservices, API Toolkit works in the background and gives you the real-time insights without disrupting your workflow. So let's say, in short, you can like fit in API Toolkit into any application.
Okay, amazing. So I think you spoke about API Toolkit being framework agnostic, which makes a lot of sense. Meaning that, okay, for example, I have Node.js application, I have Go application, or I have a Django application, or maybe some Flask API, right? I could just integrate API Toolkit into it since it's just framework agnostic. Amazing, amazing. So can you just take us through a quick setup of how we could integrate API Toolkit in our application or in a project?
Yeah, sure. So I'll proceed to share my screen now. So getting started with API Toolkit, you head over to apitoolkit.io. And if you don't already have an account, you could go ahead and create one. So I already have an account and I'll go ahead and just log in. Over here, we have our documentation, which contains the different SDK guides. Also, we have the different features here you can look at. We also have our blog tab here. You can go ahead and read all our articles. And now for you to use API Toolkit in your project, you go ahead and create an account if you don't already have one. But since I already created one, I'll just go ahead and log in. So when you log in, if you're logging in for the first time, you just have one project here, which is a demo project. But I already created one project. It's very easy to create a project. Hit the create project button and then you just follow the prompts. And I have one project here, which is called the podcast test. Let's go over here. And already you can see the dashboard. We have the Explorer. We have as you can see, we have a couple of, what's it called? We have a couple of requests here that I was testing earlier. We have the API catalog. We also have the changes and errors tab. So we're going to focus on the Explorer tab since this is just a test project, but later on I'm going to show you how it looks like in a real world project, right?
Okay.
So now I have my dashboard. So what I can do now is just to take note of my API key right here because we're going to be needing it. So over here, if you head over to API keys, you can grab your API key from here, and that's just what I need for now. So over here, I have a Next.js project which I created, a really simple project by the way. And in order for you to set API Toolkit to start monitoring your applications, so you need to install the Next.js SDK. So we have a guide that can get you through the installation process and how to basically integrate API Toolkit into your Next.js application. So I'm going to be installing the SDK. I already did that over here. So the first thing we need to do is install the Next.js SDK. So over here we have it. Now it's installing. So once that is installed, the next thing you need to do is create a .env file. This is going to hold the OpenTelemetry configuration. In the first line, maybe I could zoom in a little bit. In the first line here, what's going on here is where OpenTelemetry is sending these traces, logs, and metrics to. So it's actually sending it over here to API Toolkit. Over here, you have the name of the service, which I named podcast tests. And also here, you need to add your API key. Now, I already showed you how to add your API key. So yeah, this is basically the configuration you need to set it up. So I'm going to just save this. So the next thing you need to do is create an instrumentation.js file directly under the source folder. So basically what this does is to initialize OpenTelemetry with your project name and enable the capturing of telemetry data. So once you do this, make sure to put your project name here. You can get that from your package.json file over here. This is the name, or you can just look here. Now, I think that's all we need. So basically, that's all we need to start capturing telemetry data and sending it over to API Toolkit. But I think there's one thing more. We need to create our API routes. So over here, we go into the API folder, and I created one already, which is just hello. It says a simple hello from API Toolkit team, right?
Amazing.
So now I'll just explain what is going on here. So we need Axios in order to send requests. And I mean, it's not very important for this particular one, but I'm going to show you where it's being used. So first of all, we need to we have a middleware here, which you're going to wrap around each request you make. So you can have a bunch of requests here and just wrap it in this particular middleware.
Amazing.
And this is going to enable API Toolkit to capture that telemetry data. So basically, that's all the setup you need for you to start capturing telemetry data from OpenTelemetry and sending that data to be visualized in APIToolkit. Now we're going to see how this works in real life. This is basically all you need to start capturing the data. Let's head over to APIToolkit dashboard to see what we have been able to capture so far. The next thing we're going to do is just to run our project. And then if you go to the browser, so right now we're going to test our application. Over here, we just have the home screen. Over here, we just have our application running already. So we created an API route called hello. So let's hit the API route. As you can see, we have a message. Hello from APIToolkit team. And now let's see how this works in APIToolkit dashboard.
Okay, amazing.
So right now we are on the Explorer tab of our APIToolkit dashboard, and I sent a request, and as you can see over here, we got that data in APIToolkit. So as you can see on the left hand side, we have the actual request, and on the right hand side, if you click on it, you can actually see more data about the request you just made. So over here, you can see the type of request you just made, which is a GET request. You can see the status code here. You can see also the endpoint and the URL. Over here, you can also see the latency, how long it took to make that request. You can also see the request size, the response size, and the framework which you are using. It actually detects the framework. So over here, you can see more details. This is just the raw details. You can see the response body, which is just hello from APIToolkit. You can also see the headers and the parameters. Now, all right, that was just a GET request I made. So now we're going to make more requests and see how we get that data in APIToolkit.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to make a request to an external API. So we can see how APIToolkit works with external APIs. For this, we actually need Axios. So I installed Axios already, and then we just made a request to JSON placeholder to get to-dos. So I'll just like grab a particular to-do, let's say 1.
Okay.
And now let's save it. So we just made a request to get the first to-do on the to-do list. So over here, you can see the request you made in the last hour. You can see for 24 hours ago, 7 days, and you can also set a custom date range, which is very detailed. Also, you can just go ahead and refresh here so we can see the request we just made. And for the last hour, right? So I don't think we hit the route. We have to hit the route now. Let me go and hit the route. So we can just go back to localhost. Yeah. I don't think you can see this, but we just hit the route again. So right now we just hit the API route again. So now we're going to refresh. And as you can see over here, it records the request we just made to API placeholder. So to expand this, you can see that this took a lot of time compared to the internal API we made. So you can see the latency over here. You can also see the response size is a lot bigger, obviously. Now we can come down to the response body to see the request we just made to get the first to-do list. So now, so far all the response has been successful. So what happens when you have an error? So right now I'm going to simulate an error in my code. So let's head over to the code and simulate an error. So right now, let's try to simulate an error. So I don't think they have a 0.5. So let's just like try to see, and I'll refresh this. Just make another request. So over here, we are going to simulate an error so that we can see what APIToolkit does. So right here, I just simulated an error, and we're going to make another request. So we just simulated an error, and we're going to refresh. So as you can see, we have status 500 here, and let's expand it and see what it says. So you can see over here, the response body is actually unexpected end of JSON input. So this is the error message we got. And also, basically, you could see more details of the error here. And on here, we have a couple of filters. So you can filter different requests according to the status code. So over here, you can filter it by the method. You can filter it by method. You can filter it by status code, request type, URL path. For now, we're just going to filter it by the status code. So you can see different metrics here. You can say, let's filter it by status 500. You can see I filtered it by status 500, and it gives you like all the status 500. It gives you all the errors you have gotten so far. and you can also do it based on different like filters. So far, we just looked at the request. So if you want to see a more detailed about the APIs, you can head over to traces here. So under traces, you can actually get the history or the lifespan of the API request you just made. So over here, I could expand this. So as you can see, this happened in the page components. You can see the exact attributes, the next route. You can see like details about everything that's going on in this particular request. About the 500 we just got, about the error request we just got over here, you can also see the life cycle of this particular request. So the previous project I just showed you was a test project, but this is what APIToolkit looks like in a real world project. So over here on the dashboard, you can see more requests. You can see we have more errors and anomalies. You can also go over to the Explorer tab. You can see that we have way more telemetry data over here. So over here, you can see in the traces, you can see the different life cycles of the requests we just made. No, not we just made. You can see the different life cycles of the requests being made. So you can see exactly where it was made from, and you can see different attributes. You can see different details. So you can also see we have the errors and changes over here. We can see that you have the we have the current errors. You can see the acknowledged ones, and you can also see the ones that have been archived over here. So right here, you can also set up monitors and alerts, and you can also link this to your Discord, or you can link it to your Slack so that you can be getting errors and reports. You can also link it to you can also link your email so that you can be getting different reports and monitors. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that because it kind of makes sense if you want to use stuff like an API observability, right, to monitor your APIs and stuff. So you could just
Yeah.
set up alerts maybe for Slack, like you said, or Discord channel, or maybe um yeah, I think Slack or an email, right? It could just be a Slack channel where
Yeah, you can do it.
you get to log all the errors and stuff like that. So okay, so you basically do it here on the monitor and alerts. Amazing.
Yeah, so yeah, you can also do it when you are actually onboarding. So if you're setting up a project, you can easily just connect you can connect it to Discord or Slack and be getting a bot to give you notifications. So that was just a quick overview on how to set up APIToolkit with your application. But we have detailed documentation and articles that gives you more guide and assistance on how to set it up with your different frameworks of choice.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so let's quickly just talk about the um the API observability tool. How does it compare to other tools out there? Because looking at this right now, I think before now I've gotten to see something similar when getting to work on the projects. And what we used back then was I think Sentry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Sentry is a very popular, I think, monitoring tool you could actually use to like log errors on your application and stuff like that. What actually makes APIToolkit unique? Like what makes it different from other observability tools in the market currently?
Okay, so unlike many observability tools out there that only focus on logs and traces, APIToolkit goes deeper by analyzing request payloads like I just showed you to detect breaking changes, and it doesn't just track errors, it actually inspects the actual data flow, the data flowing through the APIs to catch issues early. And another unique feature it is ability to monitor third-party dependencies by detecting when external APIs change or fail. So you are not like blindsided by the issues outside your control. So it's also like combines with real-time alerts and seamless integration with a lot of frameworks. I think we have the most like integration with we have integrations with the most frameworks out there currently. And currently APIToolkit it makes API monitoring more proactive and insightful than traditional observability tools.
Amazing. So, can you quickly just talk about companies that have gotten to benefit from API toolkits? I think you could basically see some of them on the documentation or on the Landom site, right? But I just wanted to just mention some projects or companies that has benefited from API toolkits.
Basically, any company that relies on API, so whether it's internal APIs or external APIs or like third party APIs, can actually benefit from API toolkits. It's especially useful for teams building SaaS products, fintech applications, and also e-commerce sites where API reliability is really crucial.
Okay, amazing. So speaking about the future of API observability, so you being the developer, right? Developer in the team, and I'm working with the two, right? So where do you see API observability evolving into in the next few years?
API observability is API observability is becoming more intelligent and say automated
Okay.
because API will like help detect patterns and predict failures and even suggest fixes. I mean, it's crazy what API do. It's crazy what AI does.
AI, yeah.
So as serverless and edge computing grows, so observability tools will actually track distributed systems more efficiently, and also the developer experience will also improve with real-time insights and also proactive alerts, which make debugging faster and easier.
Okay, amazing. So are there any exciting features or improvements coming to the API toolkit? So are there any bug fixes, improvements coming from the API toolkit team that developers should expect?
Yeah, so the team is always building new and cool features. And one I could actually share with you now that is still undergoing development is the integration of time fusion. So basically, the idea is to help customers to be able to integrate like S3 buckets, basically managing their own data. So it gives you full ownership of your own data, and you could like choose to host that data anywhere else you want to host it. Also, the building of currently, the team is building custom dashboards, so you can actually customize your dashboard how you want to see it. And also, we have a lot of new AI use cases that the team is always like trying to. We have a lot of AI use cases that's coming up at the moment, and we will share these updates when it's actually available to the public. So basically, the team is always cooking.
Yeah, amazing. So is there a platform where developers will basically follow the updates from the team, right? So maybe I don't know if it's Twitter or if there's a Discord channel, maybe a dedicated Slack channel for developers to follow up with the team and what's going on with like the API toolkit team.
Yeah, there are different ways you could connect with us. First of all, we have our website, APIToolkit.io. We also have Twitter accounts. We have a LinkedIn account. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us on Twitter. You can also reach out to us on Discord, because you can reach out to us on Discord. I'm going to link the Discord server probably after the podcast so that anyone that wants to join can join. We have like a really growing team of developer and a big community there where we share ideas and we do a lot of fun stuff.
Oh, okay, amazing, amazing. So I think we've actually touched a lot of things about API observability. We've talked about API toolkits, what makes it shine, and why developers should actually integrate API toolkits to monitor their data, to monitor their API, to monitor their applications for different use cases. And I think you also got to share the screen, getting to touch about how to set it up locally, right, on your system, and basically using the Next.js projects, and which kind of just give the overall understanding of how you could integrate API toolkits in your project. So we've come to the end of this particular discussion. So if API toolkit is something you really want to try out in the future, or you want to try out, I think the documentation, I'm going to leave a link to the documentation and also a link to their Discord channel if you want to have a discussion with the team, or if you have bug fixes, or there are a lot of issues you could run into maybe when you're running their existing SDKs, or maybe you just want to speak to the team. Yeah, I'm going to leave a link to their servers and every link that has to do with API toolkit. And I could say for you, it's an amazing tool, and looking forward to updates from the team in the future. And thank you, Patrick, for coming out to do this out of your busy schedule. And I think I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.